delicate matter of incessant collapse of building in Nigeria. Barely 24 hours after Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu visited the collapsed sites of the 7-story building on First Avenue, Banana Island, Lagos, another building caved in on Sunday. The collapsed 2-story building, which was under construction, was located at 43 Ladipo Oluwo Street, GRA, Apapa, Lagos. It was reported that a bolt of lightning hit the building before it came down at about 9 in the morning. Jide, we're in for it in Lagos because when you talk about collapsed building, Lagos is like the headquarters now.
Oh, yeah, because in 2022, 61 buildings were reported to have collapsed in Nigeria. Out of the 61, 20 collapsed in Lagos alone.
Out of 61?
Yes, 20 collapsed in Lagos alone.
Out of 36?
That's representing 48% of the buildings that collapsed.
20 out of 60.
20 out of 61 collapsed in Lagos alone. And I don't think there's any building collapse that recorded as much fatality as the synagogue building that gave way in 2014, September 2014. 116 people died, and 84 of them were from South Africa. 84 of them were from South Africa. And it's the same problem leading to building collapse in Lagos and everywhere else in Nigeria. We are lucky that this last one, nobody died because there was nobody at the site when it gave way. How can ordinary lightning cause a building to give way? There is a lot of quackery in that sector. People who are not structural engineers, they are posturing as structural engineers and collecting contracts to build houses that they do not have the professional expertise to handle. If anyone will build a skyscraper, for example, it has to be somebody who is knowledgeable. I cannot get up now and say I want to go and fly an aircraft.
You can't cut corners to build skyscrapers.
And you see that one that collapsed was it early last year or 20? That one and that skyscraper that collapsed the other day, in which the owner also died. It was clear that it had structural defects. Structural defects. And complaint had been made. But because the person was, he knew big people in government and all that, no action was taken until it collapsed and killed people. We can't continue like this. The synagogue building, the inquest into the collapse also yielded the fact that it did not even have a structural engineer. And that the reinforcement used, the level of reinforcement used was at both ends of the giant building was not sufficient for a building as robust as that building. But after that, we've seen other building collapses that happened where the same conditions that caused the synagogue building to give way were also present. So it means that there is an absence of due diligence. 10 years ago, it was suspected or it was projected that there were no less than 10,000 building sites in Lagos alone. That means 10,000 places where buildings were springing up, where people were working, and only 2,000 of them had government approval. So you can imagine how many of them actually had quacks. Just 2,000 approvals for about 10,000 building projects.
20%.
So that you cannot, it should not surprise anyone that we are having this. In fact, some architects have suggested that Lagos State especially should outsource project supervision because you don't have the manpower. You don't have the manpower.
I want to ask GKB.
You don't.
This cannot be left in the hands of this bureaucrat in Alausa alone, civil servants in Alausa alone, that there's a department of building, whatever, but as big as Lagos, the number of buildings, I don't think that agency can tell me offhand that this is the number of buildings that is undergoing construction in these states alone.
Because
across the 20 local governments.
No, because the centralization of such functions also tend to overburden the system as it were. In most countries, that's what I researched this morning, approval for buildings are given by city councils. Basically, because they know what they want, areas where you can build. That's why the cost of assessment is lower. But in Nigeria, most of the things we do are centralized, either at the state or the federal level. So when it comes to diligent supervision, it will become lacking because nobody really has the time to oversee that amount of construction going on and do it diligently well. That would be almost impossible. Hello guys. I think what we need to do, like you said, was to source it out in such a manner that only those, maybe retired architects, maybe Nigerian Institute of Architects, or whatever they call themselves, maybe they are old men who have retired at 60 or those at 70, will now do what the doctors are doing. You take your case file to a point, you now give it to a consultant, and they will now give it to approval. You will now come back to government. I know it takes time, but it's better to be safe than sorry.
Somebody suggested that even the cost of approvals should be lowered drastically. Because
it's expensive now.
Yes, it's expensive. So that because that many people are cutting corners, they would rather not go and pay. So they will quickly build their thing. If by the time it's standing, we can just bribe people. So they suggested, it's part of what the recommendations of the architects back then, when that last skyscraper collapsed.
The one article?
Yes, that they should lower the cost of approval permit so that more people can come forward. Yes, because people will cut corners. When you make it too high, then they are likely to cut corners and not want to pay you. It's happening. People in our country would rather bribe tax officers than pay because they believe that the tax is too high and all that. So save lives. Sometimes you really have to just take your eyes away from the high cost of permit and all that so that we can save more lives. It's just, we can't continue to have people killed the way they get killed by building collapses. It's like Lagos alone. Abuja now. Abuja too is now in the news for building collapse.
Something is wrong somewhere.
Yeah. It's the same attitude. It's not, you can't build any kind of house anywhere. There are some places where the texture of the land will not allow you to build a skyscraper. All of this, they will do soil tests. Before you even start the project, they will take the soil sample for test. There are many things that they don't do.
No, there was a place in Ibadan that you cannot build story building because of the texture. So one man wanted to build story building. They had to take him to court because the texture in that area cannot support story buildings. But in Nigeria, it will be ignored, and now that place is having 4-story buildings because you know somebody.